Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Allen, and I am the Tribal Historic Preservation Director at the United Auburn Indian Community. And we have a very nice panel with us here today, but I'd like each one of us to introduce ourselves and see our names up on the screen. But I also just want to have every tribal person not only introduce themselves, but give a perspective about who their tribe is and how they came to be so interested in the Delta. Melissa, I see you up first. If you could get your video going and unmute yourself, can you please introduce yourself?
Okay. Hear me? Sorry, the air. I had all 5 of my kids are in the house, so I figured the car would be a better option. But hi, my name is Melissa Tayaba, and I am a tribal member at the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians. Right now, I am actually director of TECH, which stands for Traditional Ecological Knowledge. And so my department, it's probably about 4 years old now. It's a fairly new department, but I think it's actually one of the best departments, because I think that my work is just one of the coolest jobs, where I get to actually bring back traditional ways of life to tribal members. So that's what we do. And Rebecca, did you want me to actually just go into who my tribe is right now?
Yeah, if you could, very much so.
Okay. So my tribe, Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians, that is our name. Our original name is and that I think there's a lot of Shingle Springs. That's where we are located. We have 160 springs, but our original homes were, of course, in the Delta. And so some of our major village areas range, the confluence of the American and the Sacramento River. Those villages there were my family. And so the Delta region is a very important area for us. My family, we are made up of 5 different families. It covers an area there, the Feather, Sacramento River, down to the Cosumnes River and up towards the Sierras. So we did occupy, a large area. And I think the biggest misconception is, who is the tribe of this area? And so we know that there were many tribes that went through the Delta, but we want people to know that we are still here, and we were removed to Shingle Springs, but our original homelands were here in the Delta. So just to give you a little background about my tribe, we're a fairly small tribe. We have about 600 members, and half of those are kids. And so, part of our work here in the last 5 years is really putting an emphasis on getting back to our original villages. So that is a lot of the work that the tribe is doing right now.
Perfect. Thank you, Melissa. And next to me, I have Matt Moore.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Moore. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer here at United Auburn Indian Community. I'm also a tribal member. I am Nissan, which is Southern Maidu. My personal family, our background is really, it all comes from here in Auburn area, Christian Valley. So our family's really been in this location for a very long time, but other Nishanan were located throughout the area, Placer County, Nevada County, Sacramento County, Sutter, Yuba. So basically, you're talking from the valley floor up to the Sierras, the Sacramento River, Feather River drainage, Yuba River drainage, Bear River, American River. United Auburn is also made up of Miwok, so we're a united tribe. So we're Maidu Miwok. Basically, we have kind of a large Aboriginal area, Aboriginal area, just because of the fact that we do have two bands together. So we kind of, really. Like I said, Placer County, Nevada County, and that area. So all the way up into the Sierras, where we kind of meet up with the Washoe. And as far down as to Sacramento County, over east into a little bit of El Dorado, but that's kind of the transition between our the Nishanan and the Miwok. So for us, I mean, it's, all these water drainages are so critical, and that's where a lot of our habitation existed. You'll find a lot of the waterways, and you'll see village sites. Everything from the village sites to the cemeteries and sacred sites. So they're all the waterways here are all tied together, and they're just so critical to our people. It always was. I mean, when you talk about water, I mean, water was literally life for them, and still is to this day. We rely on a lot of our resources, our way of life, our culture, our spirituality, all kind of centers around our water. So it's always been critical to us, and it even goes back into our creation stories from the very beginning. They talk about the inland sea here and how it was nothing but water, and then they talk about how we got land. And so, I mean, they've been here for since the beginning of time as we know it, as a human species. And I even would argue archaeology, kind of puts us around 10,000 years. And we know we've been around a lot longer than that. So we do have a long history of stewarding the land and maintaining that, and because that was our home, and that's what provided us with all the resources to keep us thriving as a community and as people. So the Delta was so critical to all that. And going back in time, the Delta really was a lot bigger than what it is now. So it extended a lot more up into the valley. So when you're looking at these places now, it's just so critical that we kind of hang on to what we have left and try and rehabilitate what we can, and hopefully we can keep it around for a lot longer. Thank you.
The next person I'd like to introduce themselves is Antonio. And Antonio has a special role here, that he is a member of one tribe and works for UAIC. Antonio, are you on the line? Can you unmute yourself and show your video?
Hello, how's everybody doing? So my name is Antonio Ruiz, and I'm the Tribal Heritage Specialist with United Auburn Indian Community, and I am also a tribal member at Wilton Rancheria. So I'm pleased to be here, and thank you.
All right, and then Steve, are you on for us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Do you have your video available, Steve? Whew. Good to see you.
Okay, hello. Hi, my name is Steve Hutchison. I'm a member of Wilton Rancheria. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. Wilton Rancheria is a federally recognized tribe in Sacramento County. We have 4 branches of government: the chair, office of the chairperson, a tribal council, traditional court, as well as the general council. The tribe's ancestors inhabited all of Sacramento County and spanned from the foothills of the Sutter Basin along the Feather River east up to the Sierra Nevadas in El Dorado and Amador County at the headwaters of the Cosumnes and the Moqualamine Rivers, south to the San Joaquin in Contra Costa and San Joaquin counties. There's been a lot of history out in the Delta and still is. It's a very spiritual place for us, a lot of sites, sacred sites. And we are the nearest to the Delta as a federally recognized tribe. Our tribal trust land is within a few miles of the legal Delta. So we do have a vested interest, as well as responsibility to preserve and protect the area for future generations, not only for the tribe, but surrounding communities. But yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, so we have a series of questions here for our panelists, and Antonio is going to assist me as a co-moderator. And Antonio, if you can turn on your video, and then we'll have you take it.
Hi,
from
can you
here.
see me?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, our next question here, we'll start with Stephen Hutchison. And we just want to know, why is the Delta region important to the Miwok and Nissan Indigenous people of the past and present? If you can kind of talk about resources, the spiritual significance, transportation, and trading.
Yes, thank you, Antonio. The Delta has been a diverse human-land relationship that has shifted dramatically since the emergence of the Miwok and Nissan people. Prior to the modern land uses such as agriculture and related water management practices, the Delta was a rich riparian wetland that had an abundance of flora and fauna used to sustain my ancestors' lifeways. These lifeways and legacies left by my ancestors in this region is of great importance of the tribe's identity and spiritual well-being, and of course for future generations. There are countless cultural and natural resources that are located geographically within the project's footprint of the Delta and throughout the whole region of that area. The creation stories, power sites, sacred sites are all within this area. Uampeli, the Miwok word for Mount Diablo, one of the most spiritual places of power place for spirituality of ceremonial and of our tribe's history. These oral histories create a landscape of great importance, and for our tribe's existence and future generations to know that they are from that area is of great importance to the tribe. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. Melissa?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Why is the Delta region important to the Miwok and Nisenan? Well, the Delta is really the heart of the state. All of these waterways are so important to tribes, but specifically the Delta, as you all know, was a very special place. The Delta, you know, really was like the grocery store. It had everything that we needed in it. And that's why it is so important. Food, the plants that are there, you know, I don't know if people realize that the baskets that the women were weaving and men, you know, those were watertight baskets. And so the materials that you get in the Delta are so important. to our lives back then. And so, you know, all of the resources in the Delta, we used them. And that is one of the main reasons why the Delta is so important to us. Spiritually, I mean, our creation stories come out of the Delta, so we are just connected to the Delta forever. And so that is why it is another reason why it is so important. The other reason why I would say the Delta is important is because our ancestors are there, and we are connected to them forever, and we have a responsibility to take care of that. And so that is why the Delta is important to tribes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Melissa. And we'll go over to Matthew.
Yeah, for me, I mean, personally, I think the Delta is just, you know, it's one of those places where, I mean, people would come from out of the area to travel to there just to collect and gather, because there were so many resources and it was so rich. You know, aside from things just like fishing alone, I mean, we relied so heavily on, say, salmon, back when they were actually running, and, you know, heavily. Nowadays, you don't see it so much, and the runs that we do get are very sporadic and very low numbers. So and a lot of that ties right back to the water, and you know, the condition of the water, and how much water you have. Water temperatures fluctuating. It's just not good for aquatic species that are native. And then, of course, you know, with, you know, water being such a commodity here today, and everybody wants our water, and, you know, they want to claim it before it even leaves our home. So it's like Melissa said, it's kind of like the heart of the state for Indigenous people. You know, it's kind of a reflection of life in general. Everything going full circle. People living off the land, and, you know, the land provides, and therefore the people will, you know, take care of the land. But as we know, that all was taken away, and a lot of the indigenous activities and cultural beliefs were really frowned upon, and some of it was made illegal. And as the indigenous people were getting pushed around throughout the state from militias, you know, they really lost a lot of their access to those resources. You know, today it's just pretty much sealed up private land. So, I mean, there's just no access anymore. People can't get to these important plants that they need for the basketry, or, you know, other food sources or medicine. So it's really kind of crippled a lot of our culture in many ways. And the more they want to take water away from the Delta, you're going to see a lot more resources disappear. So I think as Indigenous people, we really want to, you know, latch onto the Delta and hang on to it, because it is so important. And, you know, it's one of the last major resources left around. And once that's gone, then everything else follows, you know. It's all going to go away unless we do something about it. This land was all tended to by Indigenous people. And, you know, without that, it really went in a negative direction. Now we have what we have now, with, you know, overloaded fuels in our forests, and, you know, in people's backyards, even, you know, in domesticated areas. We're seeing neighborhoods burned down. It's not just forest fires anymore. So yeah, I mean, it's just the lack of real stewardship from Indigenous people really was the beginning of the demise of our landscape as we see it today. And, you know, we barely make it through droughts now, where, you know, up here we see a lot of restrictions on water, but if you go to Southern California, everybody's watering their lawn still in the middle of a drought, because they don't have any worries. But up here we do. You know, that comes from our land, and, you know, it comes from our backyard, and That's one of our resources, and it's really just a shame that people can claim ownership over something like water. Even the air you breathe. So, yeah, it's just a shame how things just kind of swayed away from all that. And then I think it took a long time it really took a lot of negative happenings to occur for people to really open their eyes and see what happened over the years, and how we kind of lost what we had. So now for us, it's kind of our mission as a part of our preservation of our culture to revitalize all that. So it's kind of, we've been really working hard bringing back the native plant species. We want to, we'd like to get back to doing more indigenous burning on the land, to eradicate invasive species, to hopefully improve our native plant populations, improve the water situation, the purity of our water. All these things kind of tie together in one big ball of wax when you talk about stewarding the land. So as you see more like larger lands being owned by agencies or companies, it could be logging industry. Southern Pacific owns so much of our forest, it's ridiculous, and they don't manage anything because that's money to them. We're looking at unhealthy forests all around it. So yeah, it's just it's tough work. It takes patience, but we're plugging away, and the more we talk about this with other groups of people and agencies, the more they're really starting to come around to see what we're talking about is backed by a lot of science, in fact. And science is, a lot of them are saying that, yeah, we should be following what the indigenous people were doing, but it's going to be a tough sell. And people that don't want someone else telling them what to do with their land until you start seeing other people's property burn around them, then they realize, oh man, my property is a liability now. So they're starting to see the picture and what we've been trying to get across all along. So that's about all I got on that one.
So this, as an historian and a anthropologist, one of the things that I see is that the tribes around the area who are linked so closely to the Delta are limited to these small rancherias that they have, and yet their traditional area goes for miles and miles and miles. And as Matt noted, access to those lands is really problematical, and yet the people that I'm privileged to work with take such pride in being able to find unique and ways to access the Delta and to steward the Delta in some ways, and also to continue to take care of and access the resources that are there. And Melissa, I think your traditional ecological knowledge program at Shingle Springs is really just a wonderful example of how to do that and how to continue to get to the Delta. And I wonder if you could tell us about that.
Yeah, so I don't really know where to start, because I think you guys bring up a very good point about accessing plants. Every tribe is at a different spot. For us, our culture suffered. It suffered, and it's only been more recently that we've been able to really try to attain some of those things back. And I'm telling you, it wasn't easy. And the reason why is because our traditional homelands, that we don't own them anymore. It's private property, it's state property. And so, when we headed back to the river to go to the places where my grandmas were collecting, I couldn't, I had to go get a permit. And so I'm able to do that, but there are a lot of things that affect the plant. And so as we go and we put our time and our heart into these areas, we're finding that they're damaged. A lot of people, a lot of homeless live on the river. So a lot of the traditional plants that are left, right? We have access to them, but some of them we wonder if they're even safe. So some areas, you know, we really can't collect from. And so those collecting areas from our original homelands are really slim. And so I think that is a very good point. Part of the health of the Delta should be a big issue, and I think it's a I think it's a monster. How do we pick up the trash? How do we keep the Delta clean? You know, as weavers, we're collecting sticks. Traditionally, they go through your mouth, and so we have to be very careful about the plants that we're collecting and the areas that we're collecting, and so it's hard to get back to your traditional ways when you have hurdles to jump over or go through. So
Right. Steve, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Physically, Wilton, the Rancheria of Wilton is the closest to the Delta, even though all the tribes have such a connection.
Yeah, our historic rancheria is actually right on the banks of the Casumas River, right before it drains into, you know, the Delta or the legal Delta. I guess they got boundaries for both the Delta and legal. I mean, the tribe tries to work, you know, in collaboration with the land and water managers, either there be federal, state, you know, local, there's water handlers, private water handlers, you know, and so we try and get on the, you know, those projects in those areas to where we can help and collaborate with them to do restoration projects and, you know, bring back that flora and fauna that our ancestors used, you know, basket weaving and, you know, able to tend to the land, you know, collect seed and of course acorn and things like that. But, you know, there's not a lot of opportunity to work in the area because it's a lot of private land, as well as there's a lot of permitting and things that they have to go through to, especially to burn those traditional land management practices. But we try and work with the federal and state partners as much as we can. Like to keep a presence down the, especially in the Casumas River Preserve and Stone Lakes down the road here. Not only protecting our sacred sites and stuff, but actually getting involved, you know, and trying to bring back that native flora and fauna. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I've heard a lot of the tribal representatives here today talk about the Delta system being fragile. So Stephen, if we can start with you, if you can explain that.
Yeah, thanks, Antonio. So the landscape and the interconnectedness across a wide range of environs that is found on the Delta and the waterways, the effects on the water, as Matt explained, fires, management can help water quality, as well as I keep mentioning the native flora and fauna will return. These impacts access to important ceremonial locations, preservation of important locations, and avoiding impacts to these locations, such as connecting viewsheds and watersheds, tribal cultural properties, all are concepts that need to be considered at doing any projects or any kind of work, or just if you think about the Delta. I think that just an awareness of the greater importance that this place has for these indigenous people, the local tribes around here. There's just a fragile ecosystem that needs to be, traditionally managed, and we're here to help. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Stephen. Can we go over to Matthew? I think you're on mute, Matt.
Okay. Yeah, as far as the Delta being fragile, I think, over the years, just as California has expanded in population, more and more requirements are out there for domestic water, for irrigation water, ag water. And everybody wants to have more than their fair share. So it's too many years of, running our groundwater pretty much empty. It's so many wells, and reservoirs that are in place now, canals in place, aqueducts. All these things are really preventing, the land from utilizing the water that's there, and what's left anyway. By the time everybody, claims our water and ships it out, it really leaves nothing left behind. And the more we're going to draw from the Delta, it can't be anything good about that. I mean, it's great for Southern California and, maybe agriculture, but it doesn't help us up here at all. And we're going to watch the Delta dry up, and, it'll never come back unless, we stop shipping water. But just between all that and various, regulations that they're going to put in place, even regulating people's home wells is something that they've talked about, and putting in more reservoirs. We've been fighting the Centennial Reservoir for a very long time up here. And I think the one biggest reasons why it's really stalling out is because they have no science or data that supports the fact that they need that reservoir. It's just purely greed. From that, they're speculating if that reservoir did go in, how much water would be coming from our ground, the groundwater, and the lower elevations below that reservoir. So at the same time, they're depleting water from all our local people, and even can't even get water out of a well, in some cases. So yeah, I don't know. It's just the more we talk about tapping into water or anywhere near the Delta or any of our rivers, it's going to have a significant impact long term. And, it's just going to be the death of the Delta if, they put in the tunnel or, keep rerouting our water because, our landscape is being robbed. And without the water, we're going to suffer. Our people, everything that we do culturally. So all of our resources are going to, slowly dwindle and disappear. So, I mean, you're not going to have anything without water. And that's just how fragile our environment is here, for culturally speaking anyway. But yeah, I mean, it kind of just makes my stomach turn when I think about it all the time. How it's really just such a negative impact, but yet human greed takes precedence, and they worry about the after effects later, but and here we are left with the trying to repair and revitalize our environment and our landscape here in our homes, something our ancestors never had to deal with. So, when you consider that and, the way they used to steward the land, I mean, you see so many things around us environmentally just kind of really going down the tubes. So I think the Delta is one of the main factors in as part of the state, as far as the health of our environment. So, yeah, it's just going to trickle down after that. If we don't do something to preserve the Delta, then we're just going to be looking at a major disaster long term.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. And we'll go over to Melissa.
Yeah, so you know, how the Delta is fragile is a big question. I mean, we know that the health of the Delta, it's already damaged and in need of repair. And there's not enough water flowing into, through, or out of the Delta. And so that has that's major. The other part of the Delta being fragile, I think you have to mention the endangered species. Obviously, that is a huge factor. We know that there's 6 fish species that are currently endangered, and obviously the salmon is part of that. So that to me is another reason why the Delta is so fragile. The fact that, you know, it is the largest estuary on the Pacific coast is another reason why it's fragile. But if you talk to tribal people, another reason why the Delta is fragile is because our ancestors are at the bottom of it. So very fragile.
Thank you. And one of the people, David Stewart, also wrote in and talked about some of the pesticides and herbicides that get into the Delta as well, and so affect the resources there. So thank you for that. And I would encourage others, I see one question, which we'll get to in a moment, but please, if you have other questions, please do type them in. We are watching that. So we've talked about the fragility of the Delta and the threats to the Delta. I'd also like to talk about the potential for the Delta. One of the things that I think the Delta National Heritage Area wants to do is to celebrate the Delta and revitalize it and bring it back. So if you had your way with the Delta, so to speak, what would you really like to see the National Heritage Area focus on and help the tribes to celebrate? And Melissa, I wonder if you could start with that.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Some of the things that I would like to see is really taking it back to more of the traditional landscape. Obviously, we can't go back to what it was, but maybe we can help the water quality. Maybe we can help by planting certain plants. You know, Tule is an amazing plant, but if you look back, I mean, all of the things that I've read, I mean, the Tule was just such an important plant, and it's a filtration plant. And so I go through the Delta, I hear about all these projects, and honestly, I just think, how do we get it back in any way, shape, or form to what it was? That's kind of what I see. Wishful thinking. That did I just unmute? Sorry. You guys just heard all of that, right?
Yeah, I heard you.
So yeah, that's what I see for the Delta. I wish there was a way we could take care of it. You know, how do we get the canopies back where the salmon were breeding and making new life? How do we get our river systems back to what they were? And so when you talk about potential, that's what comes to my mind. And, you know, the flow of the rivers, Matt mentioned that, you know, there's this reverse flow. And so how do we, like, you know, I know that there's a lot of projects that go on, but how do we not affect the wildlife is what I always wonder. Thank you.
Yeah, I might jump in on that real quick. Yeah, it's a really good point. And by the way, Thule is a lot more than just a filter. It's I mean, you can make houses out of them. You can make boats out of them. I mean, that would be awesome if I could one day be able to catch a salmon out of the Delta on a Thule boat. You know, that'd be like a dream, but not when you have a regular boat at home. But anyway, it's yeah, there's just so many things that really, I mean, for me, it's just like being able to access certain areas. But when you do, it's just not maintained. And what can you do when you're there? And how do we maintain areas in cooperation and coordination with other groups? You know, how do we come to this middle ground to where I think, yeah, what we were talking about earlier, as far as, you know, what we had and what we have now, I mean, we'll probably never get what we had, but we can at least try and get back parts that are critical to the health of the ecosystem. You know, water clarity and water purity, that's all, you know, first and foremost for the Delta. And I think being able to perform some of the cultural activities like burning out, even in tules, even in cattails. I mean, you can burn out in wetlands. You guys know, you do it. So I think, you know, activities like that and bringing back, you know, being able to get our basket weavers more access to the, you know, important plants that they need, which, you know, it's really unique to the Delta sometimes. When you know, get away from these major waterways, those resources start getting real thin and just not as much available, or the quality's not there for them to use because of the fact that there's nobody maintaining these important plants. So I think if we can come to you know, some good collaborations, getting more Indigenous people involved with activities and maybe kind of coupling stewardship and conservation, you know, culturally speaking, and for, you know, the Delta Heritage Commission and other heritage groups around the country. So, you know, we can come to terms, and, you know, people, like-minded individuals can, you know, we can get some things done, I think. So thank you.
Pass it to Steve.
Steve, I'm passing it along to you.
You're right.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Melissa, very good points. Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, you know, bringing back that traditional management, land management, and of course, access to these sites and places. But one of my things that I guess, if I had my way with the Delta, our tribe always had, our family had hosted a 100-year gathering down there in the Delta area. Because it was so abundant with the wildlife, flora and fauna, you know, not only that, but because of the ceremonies that were held down there in certain places, just to bring that back would be something that would be very spiritual and good for our people. But yeah, just land management, access, and hopefully one day we'll be able to have those gatherings and ceremonies like the old days. Thanks.
Oh,
Antonio, do you want to answer that question as well?
Not right now, Rebecca.
I put him on the spot.
No.
So we do have a few questions here. Someone is asking, Barbara Daly is asking again for us to say and spell the Native American spiritual name for Mount Diablo. And Steve, I think that was you who mentioned that.
Yeah, that's Uampeli. That's a Miwok or Miko name for the Mount Diablo. Of course, that came from the Spanish because they seen all the tules and all the traditional fire, the smoke coming out from the mountain. So they call it Mount Diablo, but it's Uampeli, and I'll type that in the chat here for you.
Okay. And Melissa, someone asks if traditional ecological knowledge has ways of eradicating some of the harmful algae bloom that we've seen.
No, I mean, the easiest answer to that is no, not at this time.
And that's where I feel like scientists and the indigenous tribes really have a good role to interact with one another and learn from each other and see if together they can come up with some of these solutions that we need for there. Barbara also asks are any of the tribes looking to purchase land near the Sacramento and the Delta? How do we, that's, that's a hard question, Barbara. It's, I don't know. Melissa, do you want to take
Well,
that
of
one?
course we want to.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, that is a funny question, because a lot of the tribes really aren't in a position to acquire land back. But I think the tribes that are, I'm pretty sure that is on their list. I know it is for Shingle Springs. So yeah, that is, I would say, always a goal of the tribe, but yet very, very hard to do.
Right, not only for the funds to acquire the lands, but also then to have the people and the staff and the internal government structure to oversee those lands. So Steve, do you have something to add to that? You're on mute.
Mute.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to look up the spellings for those.
Ah.
But sorry, what was the question again?
If some of the tribes would like to own more lands near the Delta.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, we'd have to have a source of income and be able to be fortunate enough to purchase that area. But
Yeah.
if there's any way we could or be a partner on the land, we're all for that.
Right. Earlier, as we were talking, Leonora Clark asked, are the Miwok from the Bay Area? And is the area of Vasco Road between Livermore and Byron a spiritual area? That is closer over to Mount Diablo. And Steve, I wonder if you can clarify the Miwok ancestral lands?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a Miwok, so that they call them the plains and the Bay Miwok in that area there, are Costanoan, the term they used a lot too in the historic record. But yeah, that was definitely Miwok area. Thank you.
And let's see, there was a question about, I see two things about possibilities of museums in the Delta, or a Native American museum in the Delta. let's see. Blake, maybe you could jump in on there and help us out.
Well, I could at least mention that there is the native, sorry, I'm trying to remember, it's the California Indian Heritage Center.
Right.
That is planned for, it's just slightly outside of the Delta, just by a few blocks to the north of the High Street Bridge. So that would be, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that would be a Delta museum, even if it's slightly outside of it.
Right, and we do, Paulette, I think you can unmute yourself, Paulette, if you would like to ask your question.
I think I did unmute myself.
Ah, there you go. Yes, we hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to say that, like Blake was saying, there's a 43-acre parcel at the confluence of the American and Sacramento Rivers that's designated for the California Indian Heritage Center project. And it seems like if the tribes could work together, we could get that thing off the ground. It's been years now, and it's ready to go. The land is beautiful. It's at a beautiful location. There's so much potential there, but we need community support to get it going.
It takes a lot of
All these
coordination with
reclamation issues.
It takes a lot of
Reclaiming it
coordination with.
with Go ahead, Rebecca, sorry.
That's all right. Just it takes a lot of agency coordination. It takes a lot of tribal coordination. I'm hoping maybe the Delta National Heritage Area is something that can be used to focus that museum on because of its location. And I know that the National Heritage Area has certainly talked about including the Sacramento region within the National Heritage Area, and I would certainly encourage the Protection Agency to think about that. The last question I'm seeing here is, oh, there's two, I just lied. So the next to the last is, would you like to see more education about the effects of European settlement on the Delta landscape? And how are Native peoples using the lands now, and how would you improve the land? And how much of a role would you like in education, I think, to talk about that? You want to take that one, Matt?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's an interesting question. And there is some information out there that does kind of talk about European settlement and its effects on the landscape and also the Delta. A lot of it really covers the mission time period. The Spanish were coming in, and at that time they were really trying to convert indigenous populations to Christianity. They were I guess, quote unquote, trying to Christianize them, and then in turn they were really slaves. So I mean, it was kind of an unfortunate situation, but it was about that time when you started seeing these effects on the landscape, and the lack of our cultural activities started going away because they're busy really you know, chasing our people around the hills, and we were just trying to survive at that point. So a lot of our activities kind of went to the wayside, and you know, they were in survival mode for a very long time. So, but yeah, I mean, I personally know a couple people that are really good at what the effects from the European settlers on our, say, the valley, and the overgrazing, which occurred up and down the valley and all the way up into the Sierras. It's really, you know, became a problem, and we're still allowing grazing to happen up in the forests. And And all they did was, you know, with all the grazing, all they did was bring in invasive species and kind of started, you know, over competing with the local native plants. And over time, you started seeing a lot less of our resources available, and as you saw more of the invasives kind of come in and take over. But yeah, there is some good educational opportunities for showing people what the effects were over time. In particular, I keep going back to the burning activities that we had, and I'll probably always talk about it, but you know, without that activity just by itself had so much negative impact on our landscape. And some people can't understand it, but you know, the burning process and the carbon sequestration that comes from that is one of the ways that we kept the waters clean. Our waterway, our water was all, you know, very clean water back then, but now you can't even, you can barely see through it. It's so bad. So yeah, I mean, we're very much always willing to educate as much as we can as far as our knowledge goes. And then, you know, I've been talking to other individuals who are more experts in the scientific aspects. So, we are talking to some local community colleges and coming up with some curriculums that might be able to touch on some of that too. So, you know, that's all stuff that's in the works now, and really working hard to get to that point to where we can actually get into the college system and start modifying some of the curriculums and reflecting more of the local culture and not other individuals kind of rewriting our history. It's coming straight from us at that point. So it's a lot more to learn, and it'll stick. I think it's more personal because it is more kind of local, and you can see it around you. So I think I answered your question.
Melissa, do you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I just have to piggyback off what Matt says. The traditional burning is something we are just dying to do on the river. I mean, you go to the river, you see all of the dead stuff, and we're just dying to burn it away to get new stuff. And so, yeah, I think the traditional burning is something we should actually focus on because you know, some tribes do it, some tribes don't. For the tribes who are trying to do it, trying to find that way, you know, we need help. We need to get with those other agencies and really figure out how we can help out with the rivers because we can. And you know what happened this last season, I think I'm really hoping that it really opens up some really good conversations with tribes about how we can help with fire.
Hey, Steve, I had a question for you. So what would you consider barriers for getting the 100-year ceremony reinstated and other traditional ceremonies and gatherings?
Sorry, Matt, I got a little slow internet out here at the Rancheria. Can you repeat that?
It's all good. Yeah. So as far as the 100-year ceremony, what would you consider the barriers for getting that reinstated and that and other gatherings and ceremonies?
You know, a lot of, I mean, of course, if it's all access for those sites, you know, that these places that we need to do these ceremonies at, just gaining access. Although I know it's probably a little different looking than what it used to be from, you know, our ancestors were there. we can try our best to try and bring it back to, you know, how it was, and have those plants used, you know, for the ceremony and things like that. But I think it's just getting access mainly, and of course getting everyone together and, you know, on a common ground, and wanting to bring that, work together to bring that back, I think is one of the big things to, you know, come together about, and then hopefully it lead to other things where we can start, you know, doing those tending to the wild, so to speak. But
And
yeah, I think working on access is the barrier right now.
Blake, I see we're coming up to 4 o'clock. Do we have time to answer the last question?
Sure.
So,
I think people are willing to stay in line for a few more minutes. That's fine.
Hey,
So,
Rebecca, I just wanted to add one thing to what Stephen was saying, is access. You know, Matt, your question was great. That is the question, you know, how do we get back to our original ceremonies, right? And, you know, for Shingle Springs, we're trying right now, Pashune or Discovery Park, you know, that's where we're starting, because we want to get back to the original village sites where our original ceremonies were happening. And we want to be able to invite our neighboring tribes. And so, you know, these conversations are lengthy. They take a long time. And, you know, you can talk to regional parks, state parks. I mean, these things take months and months. And with COVID, I think even longer. So just to let you know, we're trying, and we are trying original ceremonies on the river. And of course, we will be inviting all of you when that happens.
so Tom has written in, can you talk about the numbers of members who fish or take other aquatic animals from the Delta today?
I, for one, am a hunter and fisherman, and I salmon fish, striper fish, even though striper is not really a native fish. But, you know, I catch sturgeon, and, you know, I'm a waterfowl hunter. So it's, again, you know, it's just, it goes to show the importance of the Delta. A lot of these things that we do, I mean, now they're considered recreational activities, but back then it was, you know, our way of life, and that was our survival and how we did it. So, and I like to look at it that way. It's just continuing those activities that we did, you know, our ancestors were doing. So it may look a little more modern, but it's still in, you know, my mind and my heart, I'm still, you know, Native American out there, you know, doing what we used to do. It's just I got modern tools. But yeah, it's I don't know any hard numbers as far as how many tribal members or tribal people are out there, you know, utilizing the Delta and its waterways. But I do know there are others that do use it and frequent. You know, I mean, there's people that after work every day they're going on the river fishing, or getting out on a boat and looking, you know, for you know, just to get out in the Delta and kind of enjoy it. So, but it's hard, you know, these days it gets so busy and populated out there, you know, it really takes the fun out of it sometimes, but you know, just being able to appreciate it, you know, while you can, I think. But yeah, I mean, we do fish, we still do that pretty heavily, and maybe in my tribe, maybe not as heavily, but you know, Wilton and many of their members are located so closely to the rivers that probably more so with them than, you know, with my small group up here in Auburn.
Dave, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, you know, as long as I can remember, I've been going out to Freeport in the Delta, and, you know, not only when the salmon run happens, but stripers, those are always fun to catch. Shad as well.
Yep.
But I mean, my dad and my grandpa, my great grandpa, they all hunted and fished this delta area, the Casumas River. There's stories that my grandpa told me when they were kids, they'd be out here spearing salmon in these Casumas before it would dry up. There's hardly any water, if at all, year round here now in the Casumas River in this area, down here in Wilton Rancheria. But yeah, we still have those places. We still know those places, and some of us still do those practices, even though, like Matt had mentioned, we're may have modern tools now. But to me, it still feels like what I should be doing. That as far as I remember, and that I have been, hunting and fishing, and same as my dad and my grandpa, my great grandpa, and just hearing those stories, about those days, is our history. Thank you.
I've heard stories of them being able to walk across the backs of salmon. There's so many.
Melissa, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, what I can say is, my people, we were removed from the river. I know that we have tribal members who are, hunters, fishers, but from a tech standpoint, that's what we're doing right now, is educating our kids and getting them back to the river to fish, because our old village sites were fishing village sites. They were fishing villages. You can't forget the history of, my Nissan grandmas and my Hawaiian grandpa. So the fishing was just life. And so that is one of the goals of tech, is really getting back to teaching the skills of fishing with traditionally. And one of the things I have to mention is, ducks, the birds, we're using all of that stuff for our traditional regalia. So besides the fish, we're using other animals from the Delta, and I didn't want to forget that. We're certainly using feathers for our regalia. Thank you.
Well, I'm not seeing, I haven't gone to the bottom of the screen. Let me see if I can, we do have more.
Linda down there.
You have more questions. Antonio, you want to start asking those?
Yeah, we have a question from Linda. It says, understanding the need to protect certain sacred sites, are there other places or locations in the National Heritage Area where traditional tribal activities such as collecting or gatherings could be identified for future priority projects? And I think we'll send that over to Melissa.
Well, I'm just going to say yes, because anytime we can designate something to improving plant life, I say yes. But I have to look at the original map of the actual heritage area to actually answer that question well, but I think so, yes.
Matt, did you want to touch on that?
Oh, wow. I think you guys are the bigger, more knowledgeable experts than I am on that particular area. Again, I'd probably have to look at the maps too, but yeah, I'm sure there could be future areas that could be identified. Absolutely. I mean, the more the better, really. So even if it was outside the area.
Steve, would you like to touch on that since you're a little bit closer? They're over at Wilton.
Sure, thanks, Antonio. Yeah, just to add on what Matt and Melissa are saying, there's where exactly the boundaries are. I mean, if we're talking the National Heritage Area, the Delta, of course, I mean, there's sacred sites, there's gathering sites and things that, you know, that may not look like they're there, but those native seeds and plants are still underground waiting to come up. They just need to be managed properly. So absolutely, I mean, we're always open to doing those kind of areas to restore and protect, preserve.
And I feel like too, if, you know, the more prime examples we can come up with out there to show the community and even groups or agencies that, you know, what we're talking about actually works, and then be able to, you know, take people out, show them, you know, firsthand, hey, this is what we're talking about. I think that'll change a lot of minds and really open some eyes too.
Are there more questions, Antonio, or where?
Yeah, there's one here from Richard. It says, can the plants needed for baskets be cultivated? Melissa?
Well, I mean, if you can cultivate a traditional plant, I guess, but I think one comment I could make to that is we would really like to get our plants from the original sites, from the original places our grandmas would have gotten them from. So it might, that's one aspect. But obviously, if you don't have access to that plant, or you're not going to have, obviously you would find other ways. So that would be my answer.
All right, and so I believe we have one more question here from, it looks like Stan. It says, what is being done to stop the pipe through the Delta? So I don't know who wants to answer that one, but it's an interesting question.
Lots and lots of consultation.
Yes. Maybe I'll take that one a little bit. One of the things that as staff for Auburn, we regularly do, and I know Wilton and Shingle Springs do this as well, is try and consult with the agencies who want to do projects in certain areas. And in this case, the Delta Conveyance Tunnel, the Department of Water Resources has talked to a lot of us, and I have not met a tribal person yet who is in favor of this project. And that's because of all the effects it would have, as well as the influence on, or the negative influence on the Delta region. It's just so problematic. And Melissa, actually, do you want to talk about your role there?
Well, what I can just quickly say is what we're doing about the pipe through the Delta is Delta tribes are getting together on a regular basis, and we are really trying to work together to state why the Delta conveyance will have a huge impact on tribes. So we're doing a lot of work together and really trying to figure out how we can protect, how we can protect the Delta, and of course everything in it that's important to us, from cultural resources to sites. Thank you.
Melissa is and Chairman Tarango from Wilton have done a wonderful job of pulling all the tribal voices together, and not just from the Delta region, but what's upstream and what's downstream, of course, gets so affected by the pipe. one of their biggest challenges, I think, is being heard by the agencies. And I will say, from a non-tribal staff voice, that it takes persistence, and it takes sometimes an uncomfortable amount of insistence, that you do listen and that to get the agencies to listen. And it's something that I admire the tribes very much for, standing up and just saying, no, this isn't going to work. I think I've gotten through all the questions. I wonder if the panelists have anything else they'd like to add. We'll start with Melissa and then go to Matt, Steve, and Antonio. How does that sound?
Did somebody go before me?
I guess I can go. Yeah, I guess in closing, I think what you're basically kind of hearing is the tribal people saying that this is so important to us because, you know, it really boils down to our ancestors. You know, they're the reason why we're here, and they were the original stewards of the land. And it's everything we do, really, you know, it kind of goes back to honoring them, you know, and all the family members that came before us and taught us what we know. This isn't stuff you learn in school. This is stuff that's been passed down generationally for a very long time. So indigenous knowledge is, you know, a lot of people think they can go to college, get a degree, and then now they're an expert on Native American culture. You know, we've been the experts all along, and you know, it's one of the biggest frustrations that we've seen over time is the fact that we've been left out of the conversation. And you know, they talk about us and say, you know, they treat us like we're a part of the history and not present today. And that's another one of our challenges, is just to keep that. Just that known to the public that, hey, we're still here and we're, you know, very much part of society. We're, you know, your neighbor, you know, could be somebody sitting on a council, or, you know, it could be, you know, just your, you know, average person, you know, out there in the street. So, I mean, we're everywhere. You know, we're still here. So, I mean, that's one of our main goals here. And my goal and my job is to preserve and protect our culture, our history, and to preserve it for the future generations. So you'll see a lot of passion in what we do. And, you know, when we talk about a lot of these things, especially when we're on the verge of losing them for, you know, for good. So, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, we're very, very passionate about this particular topic, the Delta. So thanks a lot for letting me be here today.
Steve, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks. Matt kind of touched on a little bit of everything there. It's about our ancestors' legacy and you know, how important this place is to us, and our, you know, oral history, existence, basically. So yeah, it's a pretty important place to us, and our responsibility to our ancestors and to the land, to those and honor those ways, and hopefully we can revitalize as much as we can, especially in this area. And I think more forums like this are important. You know, like Matt was saying, we're still here, we're still there, we're still everywhere. All right, thank you.
Antonio, would you like to add?
Yeah, I would just like to say, you know, I'm thankful for being on this forum and being a co-moderator with you, Rebecca. But you know, the Delta is really important to us, and us as Miwok and Nissan people, you know, it's who we are. Without the water, the salmon, things like that, we're not able to, you know, still hold our ceremonies down, you know, and pass those on to, you know, the youth and future generations that are to come. So hopefully this opened up a lot of eyes, you know, to a lot of people. And if there's any other questions, feel free to reach out to, you know, the tribal representatives that are here. Thank you.
And Melissa?
Rebecca, can you actually repeat the question? My daughter was in the car and I just didn't hear.
We were just wondering if there's anything to kind of wrap us up here and bring the forum to a close, or anything else that you'd like to add.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for just giving us a little platform to talk about who we are. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about the local tribes, and you know, it's hard to like Google that, and you know, it's really hard to find out specific things about specific tribes. So I'm just very thankful that you guys are open to really starting to hear our story from us. I think it's going to be the beginning of a lot of good collaborations about history. And I think that, you know, we can tell our own history, and we're right here and we can do that. So just once again, thank you so much.
Blake, I think that's a wrap for us.
Well, thank you so much to Rebecca and Matt and Melissa and Stephen and Antonio. This was a really great discussion. I know we went a little over, but I felt like it was worth it to hear from everyone. And I think as you mentioned, Melissa, I see this as a first step in, you know, at least one of the first steps in trying to continue this conversation and have, you know, definitely have a recognition of the Indigenous presence in the Delta, in the National Heritage Area, and for a long, you know, not just in the past, as you mentioned, Matt, but also in the present. So this isn't. I think this is good to have the conversation come directly from you as opposed to from someone else. So with that, I think I will just say thank you to everyone who participated today in the forum. I will be sending out some emails, just kind of wrapping up things and making sure that everybody has a copy of the, or has contact information for the speakers if you have anything more that you wanted to talk to them about. I really think this is I'm looking forward to the next year of kind of getting through the management plan and starting our direction over the next 10 to 15 years. So with that, just want to conclude the meeting, and thank you all for participating.